Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the London session on TopstepTV. Well, we have some markets moving this morning. But before we get to that, I do need to let you know about some new broadcasts, new programming that we have coming up. Super exciting, guys. Check it out. So we have two new segments that are going to be coming up. So one of them is Nick for a Tick. He's going to be doing the Globex Open at 4:45 p.m. on Sundays. It's going to kick off the entire week. And I'm so glad that Nick is getting his own segment. He's a very funny guy. He sometimes gets a bit of stick in the chat. Oh, why is Nick so negative? But actually, he's not. He's being very sarcastic, and his comedy timing is just like really cool. So I'm really looking forward to his segment. Now, another new piece of programming, we have Coach Jay. Starting August the 12th, we're going to have At the Buzzer, which was a segment that was going on Discord, I believe. But now we're going to have Coach Jay doing his own segment At the Buzzer every day, Monday through Friday, from 3:15 CT. So 3:15 p.m. CT, and he's going to go on for an hour. So that's pretty exciting stuff. We have two brand new segments, and obviously we have the London Open with me. So that's going to continue Monday through Thursday at 3:30 a.m. Central. Okay, so now we know that we added Topstep daily levels. So let's maybe change this to ES. So if you want to see those magical Hogue levels, and they truly are like absolutely just amazing, you can go to indicators, and then if you type in Topstep daily levels, it's going to come up as an indicator. So you can click on that. I already actually have it on my chart, and I can see that ES right now is literally just knocking on Hogue's weekly kickoff low. So it is like he likes to say, an inflection point. So that's going to be super, super cool. Now, before we go into any kind of market analysis, I need to remind you that whatever we are talking about here, it's not a signal service. Neither are, the levels, Topstep levels. It's just areas to watch out for, and you have to make your own mind up whether you want to be involved there or not, and how you're going to use those levels. We've pinned the Topstep risk disclaimer, so my lovely moderator Bruno has pinned the risk disclosure, so check that out and make sure that everybody's on the same page. All right, so let's have a look at what's going on in the markets. I see that copper has been moving. YM has been moving this morning a lot too. So there could be something there. And now I'm going to go back to my regular charting software. So this is YM. Let's expand that a little bit. Opening with a big gap down. Obviously, we had a nice move yesterday. And for now, it's just chopping around in this area where we kind of stopped moving late last night. But for now, there's not much to say, because it is in a range. Until it breaks out of that range, there's nothing really to do. But why do I say that it's moving? It's because it dropped immediately at the open, which is a little bit unusual for London, and nearly traversed like 3/4 of the average session range that we've had for London on YM over the last 10 days. So right now it's kind of trying to knock on London session VWAP, and we are actually below some of the overnight VWAP levels as well. That's slightly further up at 38,848. So there might be a trade there for London. I've been liking YM more for the New York session, but we might get a decent movement during London too. So I'm going to keep an eye on that. And copper is closing the gap to its own London session. And so far having a bit of trouble there. If you see these wicks, they keep appearing around the London value low and not quite able to accept value just yet. So there could be a short in copper coming up. But I still need to see some more sort of dedication, because right now all we had was like just a couple of attempts to go into value and then a bit of a non-committal from the value low. I would like to see a dedicated either 2 or 3 bar reversal from there. Like ideally a bearish engulfing somewhere would be pretty nice. Maybe on a 15-minute chart, just so that we don't rush anything. Right now we have an inside bar, but I don't like the wick. So again, when I look at the price action, how it behaves around the level, you want to see some very decisive moves and not kind of flimsy, oh, we don't sort of know where we're going and we tried, but now we're just slipping down. That's meandering to me. And when you're going to get those nice bounces, nice reversals, you really want to see a very decisive move. None of the wicks to the opposite side. So all of that plays into the decisions of whether I should get involved or not. You know, clean price action is something that you don't really see that much in London. So that's another issue, unless you're trading DAX or something. So yeah, we still need to be a little bit more patient. So yeah, maybe look at the 10-minute chart. I know that we don't have the 10-minute chart on Topstep. So there is a bit of an evening star formation, but again, a lot of wicks there. So for me, I think we're going to reference the 15-minute chart. What could happen here is, because they ran it up so quickly, we could kind of chop around and create a sideways movement, consolidation, and then a move away, which would mean that we need to wait until that happens. But for now, it's just, it's all a bit meh. Now, the opposite side of that story, so my next hypo, which I always create on a separate sort of piece of paper, printed out, very old school, and I like to see exactly what we have on large time frames. I start on the weekly chart, work downwards. On the weekly chart, it's just all down, down, and down with a little bit of a breather from the previous week. Daily charts kind of still short, but again, sort of in range between 92.13 and let's say 406.22. So it's just kind of chopping inside that range. Wouldn't really call that a momentum play, but on an intraday level, we might have some options. During the overnight, it was very range bound, just sort of stopped and effectively consolidated. Now we're kind of coming into the 10th hour of not really doing all that much. But on this intraday level, like I said, we had a little gap fill, open below value, gap fill to value low, and now it's trying to decide what to do. So if it manages to close back inside the value area, that could open up the possibility to go all the way up to ASR high, which is a shortened London version. Currently sitting at 398.88. So that's my average session range. So, we have both sides of the story, but typically when something opens below value, that tends to be a bearish signal if it's not too far away from value. If it's very far away from the value area, that's something else, and that's potential for a gap fill. And even though we have small gap fills, even when we open near value, that doesn't really carry too much risk-reward potential for me, so I tend to stay out of those. So we're going to see what this next sort of hour brings. But yeah, for now I'm kind of short biased on copper. If we can maybe catch it closer to that value low at 96.51, 96.50. Let's do a nice round number. That could be a nice area to attempt a short, and then if we get run over, that's new information. That's an expense that we take in order to get a bit more information. And whenever you're taking those expense trades, I don't even consider them losses. They're just like pieces of information. You can effectively then say, okay, so that didn't work. Was my trade location good? And can I derive something from it? Like, can I maybe make a scenario hypothesis for the opposite side? And that's why I never like to come in with a bias. I do have the open sentiment, which sort of tells me the most likely direction on the day, but I still need to see evidence of the market makers and institutions. Are the time frame participants actually thinking the same thing? Because we, with our little positions, especially if you're on combines, we don't move the market, so you have to see what they're doing and then try to kind of like piggyback onto whatever they're doing. And for now, like I said, seeing some wicks around the value low is the only kind of dedicated price action around that value low, and now we need to see whether that's going to stay. If it doesn't stay, then obviously that opens up the possibility for special situation play, value acceptance, and a further upside move into a correction. So we're going to keep watching that. Now, YM coming up to the edge of that little range. Gap fill has not happened. We did open pretty far out from the London value area. And there could be a short here. Yeah, let's try short here on YM. Just gonna see where I left my Topstep X. There it is. So this is now a tick chart, 500 tick chart, just to kind of avoid too much chop. At the top of this range, I know that we're below session VWAP here, so let's just put on a little feeler trade. And because the stop loss is going to be fairly small, since we are at the top of this range, I can try and increase size a little bit. Just looking at Bookmap to see what we've got there. There are some orders, but yeah, let's just do a little sort of 290 risk on this, just above that previous high at 38,828. And I want to see where the sellers actually step in. We've had positive delta throughout the London session since this morning, which I can see on Bookmap. But they're not exactly getting the move that they want. Now, I don't see any order blocks nearby, so there's always a danger that they're going to try and run it up to the next order block, which is at 38,844. But again, because the session VWAP has been pretty reactive so far, I am kind of trying to do this field trade on the short side. So we're going to see whether there's merit there. Trader Zeke says, how many periods would you suggest using for ATR? It really depends on what you're trying to use ATR for. If you're trying to scale your stop losses, then probably about nine periods, to cover the time of day that you're trying to trade. So, for example, if you're trading during lunchtime, that will be one size stop loss. But if you're trying to use it as a reversal level, I like to use 10 or 14 days. So that's my measure. But again, I use a twist on that. So I use average session range, especially during London, because usually in some of these products that have the main session for New York, they will not reach the ATR or ADR because it's not, like, there's not that much movement. Typically, London is about half of the amount of movement, or a third of what the cash session does. All right, so for now it seems like they're trying to make a run to VWAP, but last time around this level they tried to reverse it. So we'll see what happens here. The stop loss is fairly small, like I said, only 290. This is a feeler trade, you know, just like a little bit of an expense to see if the hypothesis has any legs. Sometimes these first trades do work out, other times they don't. But we can only work with what we've got at the moment. It does look like they want to try and test VWAP here, which is overnight. If they don't reach it, that carries a piece of information, right? If the move is really going to go the other way, it should reach the overnight VWAP and run through it. So when that doesn't happen, if they even have trouble reaching the volume weighted average price, that's pretty bearish, right? It means they've missed a major level and there's like just not enough power in the buyers to get there. So those are just some kind of my thought processes as I'm looking at the price action. Rather than kind of freaking out, oh my God, it's going to draw down. I'm just going, okay, is this working with the hypotheses? How well is this move doing? And, you know, you can see the previous candles, they just chopped around. If you were trading this, you probably would have been in a whole world of trouble trying to pick a direction because there was just no direction. And if you were looking for a momentum trade there, that gets very hairy. So, yeah. All right. Trader Zeke says, using 5 now, but I'm not sure if that's too tight. Yeah, I would say that's too tight because if you run into a slower period in the market, like let's say you're trying trading lunch hour, what tends to happen is that those 5 periods, especially if you're on a very low time frame, like you are looking at a 5-minute chart and trying to base a stop loss on the ATR times maybe 2, and then you're going, oh, you know, I'm just going to take the previous 5 candles. But if it's lunchtime, that usually means a very quiet period of the day. And then if you want to carry that position over into you know, the final part of the day, you're just going to get run over. So that's a little too tight for me. I would probably go for 9 or 10, maybe even 20, you know, depends on whether you're trading the open or something for the New York session, which can be a little bit bouncy. Zebra says, I heard you use Toots order flow. I don't know what Toots means, but all of these things that I'm using, market profile, everything is just the same thing. It's order flow. It's result of order flow that's happened or the real-time auction process, and then you have more granular sort of real-time micro order flow on Bookmap. Right, so they've now made a run for overnight VWAP. So now that's going to be the next decision point. I was looking for momentum down from the range high. And let's see if VWAP can actually make a more dedicated decision. But now I want to see a nice time-based reversal from there. And if we don't get that, I'm probably going to stay out of it for a while. Because I don't think that if we do go higher, getting involved in the middle of the range is a particularly good idea here. That copper is still not moving any higher. Getting a bit of wicks in copper. Let's try doing a copper short then, because that is following the idea that I had earlier. I'm going to place the stop loss at $300. So 290, $300. Those are like kind of trades. That's the risk that I like to use on a 150K combine. If I have a pretty good buffer, I might go up to 2, especially if I can limit risk. But for the most part, one lot on a 50K is what I tend to use. Why I'm reaching overnight VWAP. Let's see if they increase volume and have a dedicated move through it, or they run out of steam and they go, no. So very, very much just following what the price is doing, not freaking out, just trying to be as objective as possible to see whether there is any sort of a move there. I see a lot of people who take a couple of losses and then go on complete tilt. And, you know, I suppose we're all a little bit guilty of that. But when you try and unglue yourself from the outcome of your position, especially if you're positioned correctly and you have, you know, a lot of room in your daily loss limit to do these sort of tester trades, it shouldn't really affect you. So if you are emotionally affected by a loss, it just means you're trading too much size, especially on the combines. You know, I see people trying to trade. Right, that's quite a bit of volume now going through VWAP. But again, I don't have a good way to limit risk anywhere, so running a momentum trade is not my favorite. Although maybe for the sake of education and argument, maybe we can just run it. Okay, let's wait and see, because I can see some sellers now stepping in. So how often do you watch net flow to make decisions, entries, and exits? Not as often as you think. So if I'm at a level, like for example, right now we are at VWAP. And remember, I was looking to short this or go long if we have dedicated move through VWAP. Well, we're actually getting some sellers now. There's a big drop. I mean, if this candle stays below the 9 EMA and below VWAP, you know, that could be an argument that maybe we can try another run into those lows. And then if we do manage to get to the lows, typically we have yet more lows to come. So it can be a good way to sort of expand your profit target. But it's very case by case dependent. Right now, it's just like one thing that I don't like about YM is that we still haven't popped the initial balance to either side. So it's very range bound. And right now we're building structure right in the middle of it. So this would be like a 50-50 chance that it's going to work. And they're really indecisive here around VWAP. So whenever I want to run a momentum trade through VWAP, I don't want to see this thing happening. You know, I don't want to see them reach it, then have some exhaustion candles, and then chop around, go down, then go up. That's not a decisive move. So, you know, I look at the order flow of this sort most frequently, and I find it most useful in the last hour of the day on equities. So if I'm going to be doing power hour, and I do that quite frequently on equities because I do trade ES very heavily, especially during the last half an hour of trading. That's when I find Bookmap to be super useful. That's when I stare at that micro order flow. And for a lot of my decisions, I will look at the levels on the regular price chart, but then I will try to match the order blocks that are coming in dynamically into the market, and try to position myself that way. All right, that YM is trying to run through that VWAP now. So this could be an argument to run a long on YM. Slightly wider stop. Let's see how much heat we get here. And if this works, then I'm gonna aim at the high of the session, so some 1,000 ticks, but I do need to see them really push here. I do not want to see it any lower than that. There's a little bit of supply that I can see here on a 5-minute chart, so if we can battle through it, we should have a move higher. VWAP being reactive again. See, this is the problem with London and trying to trade hours that are not really that dedicated with momentums either side. So yeah, I'm going to leave that alone, because that is not what I wanted to see here. Let's stick with copper, because momentum trades during New York is not, it just doesn't behave this way. It has a smoother movement, smoother momentums. Anytime I try to do momentum trades in London, I always get smacked on the face. So yeah, let's go back to copper. It's been slower and maybe more appropriate, but yeah, this is definitely not what I wanted to see. So you see how London can give you. This is why London is tricky for me. I usually trade DAX, and DAX just doesn't chop around like that. So if you're looking for a dedicated move through VWAP, what's going on here? Hold on. Let me just find the 1-minute chart. I minimized the YM chart and now sort of lost it. So yeah, the tricky part is when you think that they've ran through a VWAP with some volume, but then nature of London is that they're going to do this sort of stuff. So now there's a short here. So do I flip and flop? Well, no, because I've already taken 2 losses on it, and I have to pipe down, right? So there's no point just continuing to chop around, because I already got chopped on a couple of trades trying to short, trying to long. And that immediately makes me think, okay, this might be a range. Immediately it might be a range, but I need a more defined range. So one way to look at that is to look at the 5-minute chart and just wait until the actual range gets established before I get re-involved in any of this. Anytime I get chopped up on both sides, it means momentum is not on the cards. It's a sure way to flip your hypothesis and go, okay, pipe down, still inside IB, no dedicated momentum within the smaller stop losses and risk that I want to take. Whenever you run a momentum trade, there's always a risk that it is going to chop you up, especially if you're trading something like NQ. If you get it slightly wrong, it can easily whip like 50 handles. This is YM, it is pretty choppy. Yeah, and so I'm glad I stayed out of that, because look, if I had gone short on the basis of, big volume coming in, oh my God, we're rejecting VWAP, now we're back up. So we have to have some way to figure out when maybe this area is not the best to be getting involved. And, I know people who will be continuing to flip and flop. But now what I like to do is to go, okay, where are my larger orientation points? So up here, average session range high is at 39.025. So now that I can't really find a dedicated move either way, and then the volume is pretty much showing me down and up and down and up, now we need a better trade location. So this is where a third hypo would be helpful. So rather than looking for run through into the IB lows all the way to average session range low, that didn't happen. Run through to VWAP and then short from VWAP, that's not happening either. Now I need the bigger orientation points, because I don't want to get chopped up in the middle. It's middle of IB. Settlement from yesterday's cash session was up here at 38,938. But now I want to see a smack through IB high or IB low. I've got nothing else to do here. No levels. Chopping around. Sort of going higher, but in, large enough ranges that would require more than 300 risk. So yeah, if I were to run a bigger risk, it's like, yeah, sure, I can do maybe a 60 tick stop. Do I really want to risk 60 ticks on this? No. So I want something that's going to give me an asymmetrical opportunity, and that's all the way up here, average session range high. And then we'll see what happens. All right, so where is the point of control in YM? Point of control for today, developing point of control is down at 38,812. I don't like to use point of control for anything apart from the directional indicator. Now, the previous day's POC is all the way up at 39,460, 450. I don't think that that's going to come in today. It's too far away, so we need other levels apart from POC. POC is not a good area to get involved in on a day when you're suspecting a range, and for the most part, even things like a momentum trade shouldn't really be happening around point of control. Volume point of control from like a weekly chart might be a better indicator. And even that is all the way up at 39,139. Now this is a couple of weeks worth. So that is within the day's range. That's within the day's range. But whether it's within the session range, that might be a little bit too much. Yeah, so I want to remember this because YM is something that I haven't traded much during London. I've traded it quite a bit during New York session. And usually in New York, if you get this sort of a move at VWAP, it's a signal for more downside. Obviously not in London, so it chopped around and then it went through. So that's going to go into my journal today. Saw a run up to overnight session VWAP, to overnight VWAP. Then did a fake out exhaustion and reversal in equity volume candles, but then ultimately picked up volume and continued to go higher. So that's maybe a behavior that I can look out for next time. Expecting and anticipating chop and sort of fake outs around VWAP. David Walsh says, I popped in here a few times, Dee, haven't seen you go over NQ at all. Do you not trade it outside of New York session? I very rarely trade NQ. I've traded it during COVID, but I find it very nervous. I find the candle, like it sort of feels like you've had too many Red Bulls and then you come to the chart and everything is sort of dancing in front of your eyes. Now, guys, you have to understand that I'm going to be 44 this year. My brain is nowhere near as fast as it used to be. When I was younger, if I was maybe 28 or 30 or 35, I may be able to dedicate, more brain power to NQ. But for me, NQ is just so erratic, so nervous. I get anxiety just from looking at it for about half an hour because of that intra-candle movement. It's constantly dancing around. Like if you look at even YM, like it's moving, but there's no nervousness in the intra-candle. We get a tick every few seconds. If you look at NQ, those tick movements are constantly happening, and I just can't do it. Like if you want to do this job for decades, at some point that sort of behavior is going to start getting to you. So I don't like NQ. I think it's a very slippery product, and as soon as I want to trade it, I also want to do the ES chart as a reference. So immediately, not only do you have the anxiety-ridden candle movement, you also have to watch another chart for more levels and slightly more accurate read on the market. And actually, I wonder whether that could be an approach for YM during London. So let's just have a look at that. Just as like a hypothesis, because again, YM during London, not something I've done before. I wonder whether there's something to it. I'll have a think about that, okay? But yeah, that's the reason why I don't go over NQ. I don't like it. I think there's plenty of people who trade NQ. We don't need more NQ people doing analysis on NQ. And in fact, one of the big worries that from kind of like a risk perspective is that when you have a prop firm that singularly trades NQ by the rates of 70-80%, that's a risk for the firm, because if something goes wrong with the market like we're seeing now, it means that there's very small number of options for the firm, right? We either suspend trading or we start to diversify. Like, I've never really worked in a prop firm where we didn't have other people on other desks. And in fact, back in the day, if there was an opening at an equities desk, they will put you there. But for the most part, if their equities desk was full capacity, you would have to go and trade something else. They would put you on fixed income, they would put you on commodities, they would put you on agro. It would be very much split between different asset classes just to cover the company from a risk perspective. But yeah, so I think we have enough NQ traders, so no, I will not be covering NQ. Absolutely hate the thing. So yeah. What is your VWAP level? Well, VWAP for the session in YM is 38,816. However, the overnight VWAP was at a different area, a little bit higher up. And we're just dancing around it. So it's 38,848 at the moment. Somebody's saying I understand what you mean about no place to remove risk, but why not use the low of the previous bar? Because those lows of the previous bars get run through in a directional move. They mean nothing, right? You really need structure to get created. So even now, if I was running along through VWAP, I would just be looking at a pretty big drawdown yet again. Because it's just chopping around. This is not stair-stepping higher because it's overlapping candles, building structure, right? What do I mean by that? It means that we don't have a dedicated move that doesn't overlap different candles, which is usually a feature of a decent trending move and momentum. No, what we have is chopping between, like, let's say using this candle, chopping in a 29 tick range and then kind of popping a little bit higher and then reversing. Same thing again. It goes further away from VWAP. Now we're back at VWAP. So, that whole idea that you can use two candles lower, that only applies for very, very good directional moves. Otherwise, if you are looking at a slower auction, if you're looking at a range-bound day, using that rule of second candle low, of previous two-bar low, you're going to get very chopped up. So especially for London session, like, you don't get those clean moves on the products that we currently have available. So I prefer to look for basing areas. Like, for example, right now we have a bearish engulfing that has given us a very clear high at 38,897. So as long as that stays on the cards, that could be the new range high within the initial balance. Obviously, I'm looking for something more now, but that will be the idea of looking for structure. And when you look at the structure, even on a 5-minute chart, which is a pretty low time frame, where is your obvious basing area? Well, all the way down here. So the only way to limit risk, if you're going to run a momentum trade upside through VWAP, to be truly safe from not having enough time to react before you go into a reversal, you would need a 67 tick stop loss. It was like insane, just purely looking at the structure. And I've even looked at Bookmap to see whether I can find an area to limit risk for that upside move. There's nothing. Like, there's This is not enough. You need a thicker area. So you need something that has a stack of orders, not just like one. And, you know, like nothing until much, much further down. So at the moment, I don't really see a way to limit risk in a very good way. So yeah, for me, I have to have a very clear structure that has been created from a slightly bigger time frame in order to get involved. If the market moves away from that, I'm just not interested in it. And that's where my risk averseness comes in, right? It's like I become very risk averse if I take 2 losses, and then I demand incredibly high probability trading locations rather than just going, oh, I'll just do another trade. It might work, might not work. Right now we're dead in the middle of initial balance, and this is a 50-50 chance. Can you take a look at gold? Yeah. Let me load up a template here. I know you guys don't like white charts, so yeah. Gold opening inside value, creating a little bit of a failed auction, a very, very small initial balance size. There is nothing there. 55 ticks for the initial balance size. That's pathetic. So there's no trade in gold for London. Gold has been a little bit weird for me. Very slow. Like it sort of moves, but it's been very choppy. And kind of difficult to read, because by the time that this sort of movement becomes obvious again, your trade location is gone. So unless you were looking at the low over here and just somewhat guessing that that's going to be the case for a reversal, I would say that in this sort of a market, you really have to pre-plan. So I would say this area here at the top would be something to consider for shorts, because that's where we turned around yesterday, right? That was COMEX. And then again, looking for another run down here. I wouldn't be getting involved in the middles. Inside the open, failed auction, that's all signs of responsive activity. And we're still dead in the middle of the value area, so I'm just, no. Gold, very slow. It's a no. Martin Vukovic says, hi Dee, what data do we need to trade DAX? It's usually Eurex, but we don't have Eurex yet on Topstep. They're working to get it. Excuse me. And yeah, so yeah, right now not too many options. I think Earn to Trade might have Eurex at the moment. I'm just going to clear my throat for a minute because I've got frogs. Right, so yeah, so I do believe Earn to Trade has brought Eurex into one of their things, and there's another company which, you know, we're not going to be mentioning here. But yeah, so the Topstep is working on getting Eurex. I don't know the timeline. I have no idea. You're going to have to ask MP. But I know it's going to be this year. So by the end of the year, we should have Eurex. Do you trade every day? Yes, I pretty much trade every day. Maybe if it's like an FOMC or something, I will stay out of it. But on most days, I will do between 3 and 10 trades. Depends on when I start, how many opportunities, and whether I've taken losses or not. So if I take about 3 losses in, like 3 full stop losses, and my full stop losses are usually about 350, 400, 450, depends on the size of the account. I will stay out for the rest of the day. So that is dependent on the number of R's that I take as losses. So if I take full -2 R multiples, that's the end of the day for me. But the way I usually do things, I either do smaller stops or I kill trades early. So a lot of the days when I'm doing like feeler trades, I might take, somewhere around, minus 0.5 R multiples or minus 1 R after 3 trades. So that means I still have room. And for the most part, if I'm not doing pretty well for the first part of the session, I will then wait for the next chunk of the day. I partial my day in, I would say, about 3 different mini intraday sessions. I call them my day trading time zones. So the first one is usually around about this time. So it's 9:30 till about 11:30 p.m. Sorry, a.m. my time, London time. And then I typically have a bit of a break all the way until half an hour into the cash session during New York. So that's then my second sort of run. And then I try to find trades all the way up to about 4:45, which is like lunchtime, usually in New York. And then I have another break, and then I come back for the last session. Usually I will have like a power nap somewhere around there, just to keep my mental capital fresh. But yeah, I wouldn't sit for 12 hours straight and just trade. I do take a lot of breaks. And like I said, if I take a couple of losses, I usually go and do something else for a while. Just allow the market to bring in new information away from the levels that I've been chopping up around. And then I sort of have a fresh outlook and fresh new levels to reference. So yeah, like I said, I call those expenses because, you try something a couple of times, not the clearest picture usually it's not the clearest picture in the beginning. So typically this happens when I'm chopping around initial balance and I didn't wait for an extension. I always find trading inside the initial balance without the extension happening first extremely difficult and slow and weird and choppy. But as soon as those other time frame participants step in, price action becomes a bit smoother, a little bit easier. It's just market makers versus the other time frame participants that has a very, very different nature to the movement. So yeah, today, like I said, I was looking for YM to kind of keep going lower. Didn't happen, so then I was like, okay, well maybe we can look to run through VWAP for yet another run at the high of the session. It's chopping around, right? It's just chopping around. So whoever asked about why don't you use the second candle as your stop, well, this is why. Would this be a comfortable trade to take? You're doing a momentum trade and it gets to within like 2 ticks, 1 tick of your stop. 5 ticks of your stop. That's very uncomfortable to me. I like to place my stops away from the highs and lows. So if I was gonna, like just hypothetically, if I was gonna run a short here, I actually want my stop to be up somewhere well above the previous high. So that means my entry probably would need to be something like this. So well above the high, just in case that they run through the high and then do a stop run in reverse. That would be ideal. Now, if I was going to do a long, I would want my entry to be somewhere in the bottom sort of third of this whole structure here. And then to also have the stop loss pretty far out. For the same reason, just if they decide to run through it, that's great. You wouldn't get caught up in a stop run. One thing that I hate doing is something I see a lot of people doing is entering a trade like this and then setting a stop right at that high. That's usually a terrible idea for intraday. This is a great idea if you're swing trading and you have a 4-hour level that has much more trading information inside it. And then for example, you say, I'm going to run a limit order from this supply with the means to sort of have my stops up here. That's a much more valid limit order short. Why? Because you're effectively going with the trend, so you expect the supplies to be reactive, and then if it breaks that level, it's a completely different trend, right? But you don't, like, intraday trading just doesn't have that kind of accuracy because there's not that much trading information. You know, all of these levels that we're looking at, they're very short term and they do get run through. So if I'm looking at a supply and demand area on a lower time frame, I will actually expect those to be run through before the market turns around. Maybe if I have a good confluence of super strong levels like average session range high, value area low, you know, at the same area or something like that, I might consider not using the high as the entry. But for the most part, one of my favorite setups is to run through a level and then reverse. So scalp through the high or the low, grab whatever it gives you, and then you reverse the trade. So that way you stay on a much better thing. So anytime something's in the middle, it makes me really uncomfortable. I just hate trading middles of the middles. It never moves smoothly. I always get chopped up, and you know, I find that those sorts of trades from the middles of ranges take so much longer to actually do what they're supposed to be doing. How much is tick on copper futures? $12.50, just like ES. Do I anchor each VWAP or is this default settings? So for my Blatek VWAP, you have two settings. You can even do two VWAPs, but I flip between the overnight session. So that's, is that a default setting? I can't remember how we set it up. That in the version that went to market, but I think it might be set to session. Don't quote me on that though. But I always start with overnight VWAP, especially for London. If I see that the market has moved too far away from it, I might use session VWAP. But both of them can be anchored very easily on this particular indicator, which is Blatek VWAP. But I also have a way to use control, click. Don't ask me how to do it now because it's too early in the morning for me. But yeah, there is a way to do two VWAPs directly on the chart and then to change the color of them so you don't get confused. But I like to keep things simple, so unless absolutely necessary, I would just use the overnight VWAP for the gauge of how well the market is doing, whether we're breaking through it or not. And typically it's something that I like to match up with other areas. So not just have singular VWAP. I would like VWAP to have another reason why I'm using it. Otherwise, the result is lower accuracy, too much guesswork, especially for London. I mean, it's now reversing. So now, is this a VWAP reversal when we overshot it by about 50 ticks? I suppose you can call this weakness inside initial balance, because we do have some supply that has caused the reversal. So yeah, not the best trading in the middles. Like I said before, there was a 50-50 chance that this is going to either go up or down, so you have no edge. And at one point, it looked like they were really pushing. Like, look at the size of those equivolume candles. Usually, if you were in a New York session, this would bring a very, very nice momentum further up. But they just ran out of steam, turned around at the first available supply, and then just went straight down. So to me, that's pretty difficult to read. And if we look at, let's look at DAX. Where did that go? And you will see what I mean by going to the top of the range. So here is a very, very similar thing that's happening in DAX. But look at how it went through to the VWAP and how it did go to the high of the session. So during active trading hours, that's the kind of behavior that you will see. This is why I prefer trading DAX for London over anything else. But again, we don't have it. So, I've got to work with what we've got. And DAX is one of my main instruments for London. And look at the smoothness of the movement. So even on a 5-minute chart, once they ran through VWAP, there was a dedicated move higher. Immediately. None of this like, we went over, and then we go back down. So this was a much easier read for me, for example. And we now have just a very normal rotational day that goes from the bottom to the top. And now, I'm still waiting for it to break the initial balance. I don't like to get involved before that, but it would have been an easier trade, right? It would have ran to VWAP. We would have gotten that push that we saw in YM, dedicated move all the way up to near session highs. And now it's again smoothly reversing from it, going through VWAP to the opposite side. Smoother movement, right? I find that I really crave smooth movement from my products these days. If it's choppy, if it's indecisive, and we're sort of even range bound markets can be very nice and smooth. You can have beautiful moves from one side of the range to the other, but as soon as it starts chopping around, immediately I'll just get all queasy and just go, ew. All right, let's take a few more questions. Joshua Williams, morning Dee, are you no longer doing your live stream on Tuesdays? I don't do my own live streams during August. If I wasn't doing Topstep, I would actually take the entire August off. But yeah, just for, I just want to get this out there. I do still suffer from a chronic illness, so my energy levels can be a little bit erratic. And if I kind of plow into multiple streams per day, like 2-3 times per day, and then I keep doing that for the entire week, I'm going to be in bed, just not able to get out of bed. So we obviously don't want that, and I have to really moderate myself. It's really hard because I love what I do. If I could handle it, I would just stream all day long. But unfortunately, I find that after about 2 streams per day, my energy levels go, I start losing my voice, and it gets very, very challenging for me. Today I do have Market Stalking with Dee at 7 p.m. my time, which is 1 p.m. Central. So it's going to be a long day for me today, but on Tuesdays, what used to happen before is I used to have the morning session, then my own live stream, and then Market Stalking with Dee. So literally I'll be working for like 13 hours a day. And I actually asked Tim, one of our producers, whether we can move that around because I was just dying. Like I would be so dead on Tuesdays, I would just be like, gone. And today, like I said, again, another long day. And I'm also doing a podcast with Austin Silver today later. So again, there's going to be another thing to keep in mind for my own energy level purpose. But yeah, so I have to be a little bit mindful of how I manage myself, purely from that perspective. Okay, so this copper has held the value low and the high that we had earlier. Went into a bit of a drawdown there, but I'm going to keep this trade. I'm going to keep this trade to see exactly if we can make a dedicated move away from the value low, unglue ourselves from this area. But yeah, still wicks happening. I'm not going to like it if it starts to keep edging towards the high here. That's like, that means it keeps trying to break through higher, and then that could be a value acceptance at some point. But again, copper, take it with a pinch of salt, because it's an out-of-hours session for copper as well. We do have the London Metal Exchange that does trade copper. And then there's like this thing called curb trading, which tends to happen around the COMEX Open, I think 10 minutes before we start trading. And so keep an eye on that. Let's take a couple more questions and then we're going to finish it up. H says, did I trade FTSE before? I traded FTSE probably about 2015, 2016. I traded a lot of it. Back then, it would shut for the evening, so you wouldn't be able to trade it after 4:30 my time. And that's the bit that I didn't like, because if you had a setup and then you wanted to maybe carry it over into the next day, I always had this little bit of anxiety saying, oh God, where it's going to open? And it used to gap a lot. So because of that, it wouldn't trade overnight, and then it would gap and you'd be like, okay, now what? So you would either end up in a bigger loss than expected, or a much, much bigger win. And it was just a little bit too erratic, I suppose. And then I just decided to focus on DAX. It's how I started doing DAX. And DAX just became my primary product. So I haven't traded FTSE since about 2016. I've looked at it on occasion. It does move, but these days most of the equities move anyways. So for me, DAX becomes DAX is like the king of smooth movement. So for me, there's no replacement really. Reading Group. Dee, you always seem very calm and in control, and it comes across as if you're that person even outside of the stream. Were you always that controlled? What does a tilted D look like trading? Yeah, so this is an interesting question. I am Mediterranean. I am generally pretty passionate, but when I was a young person, like we're talking 19, 18, 20, I was very, very snappy. Let's put it that way. Snappy D. But as time went on, I'm not that young anymore. Like, I'm not that old either, but, 43, I'll be 44 soon. So, you come to a point in your life after 16 years of doing this where you sort of unglue yourself from the losses and, like, the emotional side of things. Even when I have a bad day, I don't equate it to my inner peace or disruption of my inner peace. I kind of like to look at the bigger picture. Maybe it's because I've been through like 3 civil wars by the time that I was 20. So that could have played a part in my ability to, how would I put this without sounding like a complete psychopath? My threshold for emotional reactions is much higher. So it's not that I'm not emotional. I do have emotions. But they just, like, this is just money, it's like, it's not a life or death situation for me. It's more to do with playing detective and working out what is actually happening in light of levels, right? So I'm not looking at this as like, oh my God, I have to make my mortgage this month. Oh my God, how is this gonna? Oh God, I've just lost. I only have 1,000 left on daily loss limit. I don't look at it that way, if that makes sense. I just look at it in a way of, even if I like size up and I get smacked on the face in a daily loss limit. It happened to me the other day. I think it was Friday, and so something happened with the brackets across the board on Topstep, and I didn't realize that. So I put my what I thought was a $70 stop loss, but I sized up on gold, right? I was in like 3 lots, and it was in profit for a while, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna take my profit up there, and then it never triggered, went all the way back, and obviously ran through the data loss limit. And some people would be like, oh my God, like, what's happening? It's like, it happens. Like, it happens. So to me, it was just like, oh, okay, interesting. So I reached out to the development team and I said, is there a problem with the brackets? And they said, yeah, sorry, we're doing an update in a minute. And I was like, okay, too late for me. Bye. So, you can't get too worked up about things. You should look at this whole process from the side of data science and gathering experience, journaling, what happened, what worked, what didn't work. So for me today, in my journal on the why I am London trading, which was an idea that I had before, but never actually tried it until today. Here's some stuff that I've learned today. Don't trade in the middle of the range, so that still applies. If you're looking at VWAP as a potential run through to the other side, like I normally do in DAX or I normally do in YM during New York, that's something that didn't work today. So now I've got something to to track. It's like, how many times does that not work? And could I maybe use that as a counter indicator? So next time, if we run through VWAP, should I wait for a reversal on a 5-minute chart, go back the other way? That could be a strategy, right? The strategy that I'm doing in copper is nothing new for me. So there's nothing for me to write on, because it's value low rejection. It's a standard sort of run up to val, reverse, and then go down. But I wanted to see if there was an opportunity in YM outside of those big levels. For now, the answer to that is a no. So right now, I'm going back to, bigger orientation points after getting smacked in the face a couple times. But that's all just data. It's not like losses. It's literally just data. So yeah, if you try to maybe unglue yourself from the outcome of any single trade, or for that matter, any single day, because it's like dieting, right? If you're trying to lose weight, or maybe some people are trying to gain weight, that's usually my issue. But let's say you're trying to lose weight and you spend one day dieting. Is that really going to make an impact in the way you look, the way you feel, your energy levels? No. But if you continue to diet, if you continue to be controlled, and if you continue to make good nutritional choices in the next 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, the discipline that you've exhibited through nutrition will start to be obvious to everybody else, not just to yourself, right? Well, trading is a little bit like that. If you constantly go on tilt, and if you're constantly being bothered by losses, and I will repeat this again, if you're bothered by losses, you are trading too large. One thing with these combines and stuff, like, guys, I've traded 6-figure, I still have a large account, but I've traded 7-figure accounts as well. So I will say this, the pain point in a combine with a 3K loss, your threshold for pain is like so much lower than if you were to trade a bigger account, right? So even I feel it, but I don't get bothered by it. It's just like you have to control your size. So find the size where you're not tilted. You're bothered just enough so that you don't go on a rampage of loss after loss after loss after loss, but also don't go so small that you never even feel anything. So, if you're going to do a trade in 1 micro on gold, and then you lose like $20 on one trade, that's not enough risk. Okay. We are trying to be prop traders here. So you do have to size up a bit. But if you find that you get tilted risking, let's say, $200 on one trade, then that's obviously too much size for you. So try risking half of that. See how you feel. I can't tell you how that's going to be for you, because I know what it is for me. And for me, if that helps you, I don't know. But for me, when I'm doing 150K combine, one lot in a copper, which is $12.50 per tick, versus 2 lots in YM, which is $5 per tick, that's my risk, right? So I try to never go too much over 350 or less than that per trade, because that's my pain threshold. I feel that I can lose a few, and then once the good opportunity with a higher risk reward comes up, I can drag myself out of any kind of hole that I've done in the previous day trading time zone. So hopefully that helps. Anytime you have emotions involved, it means you're trading with too much size within the context of the account that you're currently trading, or the buffer on the account. So keep that in mind. But the way I stay calm, am I this calm outside of trading? Let's just put it this way. It takes a lot for me to kick off. So tilted D is not something that you will see often. And it's usually something to do with family. One person that could really push my buttons was my father. We had a very, very strained relationship, especially in the last few years. But throughout my entire life, it was a big problem. But trading it just doesn't quite push my buttons in the same way. But having said that, even in my private life, I tend to be pretty calm. I'm not somebody who, let's say, drives around and there's traffic and people are like flipping you off and stuff because it's London. I'm not going to go flipping them off back, right? So it's like road rage, all of that. If you're experiencing tilting in other areas of your life, it's bound to translate into trading. I always like to use like real world examples of how you should learn to behave, because there are signs. You get tilted when there's a queue in the post office. You get tilted when you're driving a car, there's a traffic jam and someone flips you off. You get tilted when your spouse comes up and says something to you, and then you are working and try to trade and they rile you up. All of that is signs that maybe you don't have good grasp of your emotional control. And maybe you need to do more meditating. Maybe you need to go smash and, lift some heavy stuff at the gym just to get that negativity and that, like Hogue likes to call it venom, to get the venom out of you in any situation, and especially in trading. So if you're someone who gets tilted in trading, the likelihood is you will get tilted in other areas of your life too. There's no like super calm person that comes to trade and then suddenly has a personality transplant and starts doing the other crazy stuff. Usually you have, like for example, athletes. We have Francis Green. He's on Topstep. He was a footballer with a bit of a streak in him. But then as he got older, he became a family man. He found that he was able to rein in that side of him. So I think there's a matter of maturity, but also a self-awareness of how you are in other areas of your life that might actually help you with the whole going on tilt. And if you're still getting tilted, you're trading with too much size. Like guaranteed, right? So find that little pain threshold and let's try and get better every day. I'm going to finish it up here. So thank you again for being here. I'm going to keep this copper trade for a while longer. Let's see how that's doing. All right. So currently slow. It's slow. So 150 going. Let me just see, because I don't like looking at my balances and stuff when I'm trading. I like to remove all of the monetary values when I'm trading, because then if I have the monetary values, I'm always trading my P&L. I'm like, but if I remove that, I literally just have the process in front of me. This is why I have ticks instead of monetary values on my chart as well. Okay, so those couple of trades that I did on YM before put me down $642. $3,000 loss, obviously for the day, but since I do have some profits here, I don't really want to derail that too much. So this is probably going to be the only other trade that I keep for London. I'm not going to be doing more trades for London, and I'm going to size down to one loss on YM for any kind of New York trades, but that's going to be a different combine. So, and that's on Ninja as well. So yeah, this one probably going to be just a small win today if this copper goes the whole hog. And if it doesn't, it's going to be a small loss. So just kind of trying to keep that downside under control as we get closer to the profit target. No rushing, no oversizing, just staying very, very controlled. All right, so that's it for today. I'm going to see you later for Market Talking with Dee, much later. In the meantime, I always like to say let's try to be less grasshopper and more market stalker with every passing day. So let's keep that going. Less Muppet, more trader. Thank you again for lovely questions. I will see you again a little later today. Take care.